Mic check 1, 2. Mic check. Okay.
I'm not sure what just happened, but I think we're live now.
Yes.
All right.
So we're ready to rock this then.
We're ahead.
Okay. And we're recording on the Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Let's wait just 1 second. We get a few people in the queue.
Yes.
And we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, athletes, to One-on-One Live with Coach Blu and Athletic Director Marissa.
Hello.
You've had an interesting morning so far, spending your morning at the tire shop. Now that winter's halfway over, you decided to get some winter tires.
So wonderful. I just love spending money on tires and car stuff.
It sounds like you do. You need it though. It's like a toboggan trying to drive over here in your car. It's a nightmare. We can't complain. We need it though. Let's get out there and do some winter sports. In fact, there's a lot of stuff happening this weekend on Team Addict Athlete. We have the Frigid 5K and Polar Plunge that a lot of folks are doing.
Yeah.
And John, he's doing the Snowshoe Festival. And
on Saturday.
Yeah, they always coincide on the same day, and it's a nightmare because we can never do both. And I've always wanted to go do John's, but the team does the Frigid 5K, so we've got to be there to film it and to do it, and then listen to them trying to convince me to jump into the ice, which is never going to happen.
Nope.
Those folks that do that, man, my hat's tipped to them. But I think I could do it, but not in Utah Lake.
I wouldn't want to anywhere.
Yeah, not in Utah Lake. I don't think I could do
by
that.
Choice.
Nice. But nonetheless, let's get started. Marissa, let's jump in and talk a little bit about our Patreon subscribers. We are so lucky to have so many supporters on the Patreon site.
Yeah.
Patreon's this amazing kind of giving back platform that if you like what you're hearing and you want to help us spread this message a little further, consider jumping on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/addicttoathlete. And there's a bunch of tiers that you can choose from depending on what level you'd like to invest in. And different perks, features, and bonuses come with those things. And so realistically, with $2 a month, you get all of our bonus content, which is golden, I think.
There's other just exclusive swag for those who are patrons, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And so, it really does help us get this podcast out a little further. And for those of you that are contributing, hats off and thank you. It really does help a lot with the platforms, the advertising, the equipment, just the push to get this thing out there quicker. And we're getting quite a few people that are tuning in. And one thing we've really been excited about with this one-on-one is we are now tinkering with ways to have you guys interact even more through call-in and the ability to come on live, not just through Zoom, but through phone communication as well. Now that we're in the 21st century, we should probably look at how we do that. Nonetheless, Marissa, do you want to give us a rundown on who our Patreon subscribers are so we can give them the thanks that they deserve?
Absolutely. So we will start with our super fans. We want to thank Karen Hardy, Steve Riggs, Tracy Whitby, Jerem Thurston, Tara Butson, Holly Davies, Scott Foster, Brett Frube, Chris Williams, Sensei KP, Patrick Forsyth, and Brock Ellerman. Thank you to our super fans.
You guys are rock stars. Thank you so much.
Our rookies, Sione and Mary Inuk, Sherry Polson, Earl Dyer, and Wendell Wood. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Our pro level is Andrew Baird and Gary Thurston. Thank you, guys. And our champion level is the Robinson family and Ron and Dee Loesch.
Absolutely. And, I'm excited. Coach D up there, she is going to change some worlds up there. And, if for those of you guys that don't know, Addict Athlete, we have a very exclusive sober coach training program to certify you as an official Addict to Athlete recovery and sober coach. It is a intense 40-hour, in-depth, training program so that you can open a chapter of Addict to Athlete in your community, to utilize our 501c3 to benefit the folks in your neck of the woods that are really struggling with this addiction. I'm noticing more and more that it's the grassroots level programs like Addict to Athlete and some of these others that are really making huge changes in addiction recovery and the platform that is people that need help. And so, Coach D up there had a very strong epiphany on how she could take this training course to benefit family systems. And I'm excited to see what she does. Even our coach way out there in New York.
Yeah. So Coach D wants to emphasize, and that's the best part of this training is that you can find something that works for you. She's a family member and who has had family members struggle, and that's what she wants to help with. So if you go to our website and go to our blog, she has a recent blog post that we just published, kind of coming from the family member's point of view and perspective. And we also have a whole page of resources for family members of addicts. So please go check that out. Read her blog post. It's phenomenal. She's going to continue to do more. We're talking about doing some online Zoom classes. And then we have another sober coach who is from Long Island, New York. And I talked to him yesterday about he wants to start working on getting a chapter going out there with the veterans and first responders that he has been working with at a facility out there. And so we're excited to be able to maybe even have a chapter out in New York, Long Island.
Absolutely. So that's the continued growth that we do. But go on and check it out. There's some introductional information if you want to check it out. It's on addict2athlete.org underneath the resources page, and you'll find the links to make that happen.
Yeah.
It is an amazing, hands-on experience that Team Addict to Athlete has developed to help, again, as we say, erase addiction and replace it with things of greater value. But we're going to jump into today's topic, and there's some stuff that Marissa and I have been doing the last couple of weeks that's really kind of got our eyes open to some base layer issues that addiction seems to intertwine with. Just last week, or was it this week? I can't remember. There's been so much going on. I did a presentation to counselors and therapists through our modality of therapy that we use here at Team Addict Athlete. Not loosely, completely based off of EMDR for trauma therapy and processing,
yes,
which helps individuals that have experienced any kind of trauma be able to move it from that fight or flight response in the frontal lobe into long-term memory. And since the inception of Team Addict Athlete, we've used movement to create that. And part of what we've been doing is kind of gathering some just small data on how to do this for everyone. Because when Team Addict Athlete started, that's kind of the modality I increased, was kind of like, why are these guys telling me so much stuff as we're running? It is a mechanism of EMDR. And so we're starting to now utilize our facility here to be able to do more precise and individuals therapy using this model on our treadmills. And when it gets warmer, we can do it outside. But we're hoping to get the study up and going soon, that you've been reaching out to some local universities.
Contact some
and
professors.
We've got some stuff in the works to see how this works. Instead of the traditional sit on a couch and follow your fingers, what it's like to do the normalcy of like, processing, which is walking or running, hiking, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But then last night I was able to be on a panel discussion about betrayal trauma and sexual addiction. And, that took me into some interesting, research and just some education of getting kind of like, we know that all addiction, in my point of view, starts from some kind of trauma, something that hurts.
Yep, some kind of pain.
And the interesting thing with betrayal trauma is, these are typically the folks that are left in the wake from a person that may have an addiction or may have a pornography issue or sexual addiction. And so as we're going through this, I'm starting to see how important it is to not just stay settled, to not just, throw up your hands and say, well, it is what it is. Marissa, when you hear and you think about, what betrayal trauma is, I mean, how familiar are you with it? And let's jump into a little bit about what can we do to help people recognize that, what I'm experiencing isn't normal. And, I was talking to these folks last night, and the video that they produced is up on YouTube. We'll make a connection to it for you guys. But it was interesting to hear just the different perceptions and understandings of some real life accounts, right down to some other clinicians on how they approach it. Because whenever you have a loved one that struggles with addiction, doesn't matter what kind, form, or shape, there's always somebody on the other side that loves that individual,
family members, friends,
that is hurt in the wake.
Well, and betrayal trauma goes along with a lot of different things. It has to do with somebody that's depending on someone else. And then that other person violates the trust or well-being of the other. So they talk about it a lot with somebody who struggles with pornography and relationships, but in just regular addiction, you're going to have issues with betrayal trauma when there's, deceit and lying, and you're dependent upon some other person, whether it's a spouse or a parent or things like that you just don't feel like they're holding up their end of the bargain.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So betrayal trauma, yeah, is that result of a violation of deep attachment, where there's been some kind of abuse or neglect of an individual who depends on that person, and it kind of like puts that safety and well-being into question. And it most commonly occurs from history, from child abuse, even you've experienced, right down to partner betrayal, which seems to be a big thing these days. What I'm noticing specifically, even when I'm doing family therapy, couples counseling, whatnot, I'm noticing that a lot of times we engage in relationships where we don't have the full story. More often than not now, I see that both parties, and more often than not, men, it's a problem we have to kind of deal with, is that we come to this agreement of connection with skeletons in the closet that we are terrified to let out.
Yeah.
When they inevitably do come out, then that is when there's this huge kind of sucker punch of like, wait a minute, what is this?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You, Marissa, even had to experience a little of that because of just the way that I hid from, from that true self.
Yeah. So when we first started dating, there was a lot that I found out, but luckily it was early enough on. I found out most of your history and your deceit before we got married, and I started counting on you even more. But yeah, I think in a lot of cases, people have issues before and they get into relationships and just, it's like as you get into relationships, skeletons come out of the closet and you get to know each other a little more. And then somebody's hiding this and somebody's hiding that. Sometimes I'm sure there's relationships that are great and then somebody starts something secretively in the background. But I think in most cases, something's already there previous to the relationship starting.
Absolutely. And it creates this emotional, cognitive, behavioral distancing. And more times than not, the person who has those skeletons or maybe has those vices tries to suppress it so much that when it does come out, it is like the world coming out beneath you. Now, this in America, in probably the world, this is one of those things where, gentlemen, we need to step it up quite a bit. There is this emotional disconnect that we're starting to have, and it's not just with men, but men typically, do this quite a bit, where we are afraid to kind of like show our cards, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's this bizarre kind of like mindset that we have to be all that and then some. What that does is it creates
to really be judged for all of the bad stuff they've been through. So keep it hidden.
Absolutely. And even here in Utah, where we have, a lot of religious connotation to relationships, it's interesting because many times they'll make like religious like connections and take some very strong spiritual, like I would say, responsibilities on their shoulders. And then, after the fanfare and whatnot is kind of fizzled out, it's like, I really don't believe in that.
Well, and I think it's oftentimes they use that as a distraction modality, some way to keep it away. We just had a listener comment and said, or they don't think it's a problem. Yeah. Which is very, very true.
Let's drill down on that for a moment. Let's just talk about the ones that don't believe it's a problem, because this happens quite a bit too, where I'll have a couple and the one individual will say, I'm totally fine with let's say with drinking alcohol or watching porn now and then, so I don't have to feel like I'm making my wife responsible for my needs. It goes way beyond that. You may not see it as a problem, but every time, this is the thing we're going to start diving deeper into too, Marissa, because even with, let's say, recreational marijuana, alcohol, it doesn't matter what is out there. If you're using something to distract yourself from the true experience, we have a problem. And here's the deal. You might be able to do it and be fine.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, and people get up in arms when I talk about this, because no matter what, if you're using alcohol, marijuana, whatever, pornography, you're distracting from something else. You cannot live in both worlds. Yeah. And people say, well, yeah, whatever. It makes my experiences better, but it doesn't. It might for you, but what about the person on the other side of that?
Yeah.
Like I talked to a parent years ago who was saying, I don't see anything wrong with coming home and having some drinks. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you coming home and having some drinks. But what happens when you tell your kid that, hey, if you ever get in a pinch or a pickle, you call me and I'll come get you. And then he's like, oh, because that's how he got put into our program was, He was out picking up his kids and his friends from an experience they had, and was pulled over by the police, blew DUI, blew it, and got his license taken away.
Then the kid can't depend on the parent, right?
Can't depend on you.
Yeah, they recognize that, hey, it's unsafe to call at certain times, or I don't know when I can call and really get the help that I need and have them back me up.
Now, granted, that's kind of an extreme case, but you have to understand there are a dozen or so or more experiences daily where you're not emotionally able to be available because of the intoxication.
Well, it's just, cognitively, you're not aware of what you are when you're clear-headed.
So I would say if you have a spouse that's hell-bent on doing that, then they have to be very upfront with the family. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You have to be very blunt and say, I am stressed, I am overwhelmed, I'm doing this to check out. I will be in my man den or whatever, right?
For the next few hours. Yeah.
But we won't do that because we're trying to portray that we can be there and we can be more interesting and we can be more funny and more loose.
Well, and oftentimes media develops that way. That's what they show us, that it's fine and everything's no big deal and you just have fun and you relax and then you can have a better time.
Well, we've seen this with mommy wine time, right? I mean, during the pandemic, you saw a huge increase in casual drinkers becoming problematic with alcohol because of the stress levels that were introduced for situations that were out of our control.
And people sending out free coupons for free wine. When you have a baby, it comes with, you get your mommy kits in the mail and you get like baby formula and coupons for free wine.
So the first and foremost is you've got to stop kidding yourself that even though you may not believe it's a problem, it is. Can it be managed? Absolutely. But that means you have to be very blunt with the communication you're having with your family system so that they're aware of what they can and cannot depend on you for. And that sucks too, because again, you'll fight me till the day's end. But I'm telling you, if you put yourself through a situation by which you think you're pulling it off, and I see this all the time, even with clients I've had that come in, they're high and they're kind of messed up and they think they're pulling it off, but it's like, you're not. We can see.
Pretty obvious.
Very obvious. And there's situations too where your kids will notice. They'll notice that when you're not using, you're a little bit more rough, maybe a little more aggressive, right? Maybe your tone's a little bit more intense. When you are drinking, then you can be approached. And so you get the perception as though, well, I have a better relationship with my kids when I'm high or when I'm drunk.
Well, and
no, you don't.
Parents are kinder.
Of course.
So kids are totally supportive of that because they can get away with more. But really, what does it come down to, whether it's a parent or any other relationship, is maybe you need to develop better relationship skills, communication skills, problem solving skills, rather than just utilizing a substance or a negative habit to help you function.
So what you'll see during this is that, whether it be a spouse, a loved one, a child, what have you, is you'll see this emotionally distancing kind of behavior, right? And typically what happens is we minimize the severity of it because we don't believe or think we're doing anything wrong. And you may not be, but the relationship's going to struggle. It has to, because again, you're taking away your investment for something that you find greater value in. And then you'll wonder why your marriage is having some rough points and your kids are kind of like detaching, and you'll be very confused. But then you usually double down on the fact that it cannot be because of my behaviors. It has to be because of you.
Yeah.
And then that's where the betrayal really kind of kicks in, because that person is so hell-bent on staking their claim
that I'm fine,
that's when the gaslighting kicks in. And that's where it's like, well, I don't have a problem. You have the problem. You're just not listening to me. That kind of really stuff is bad. It hurts relationships to the core.
It damages them long term. And that's the hard thing, because then when maybe you do start seeing things differently, then it's really difficult to climb out of.
One of the saddest things I see with this is kind of, I guess, it's been coined the betrayal blindness. And what it means is that you tend to believe, because that is your life and your circumstance, that is normal.
Yeah.
So many people in situations like this will kind of be blind to the fact that they are being emotionally abused. And they'll just kind of come to an understanding of, I guess it is what it is. Yeah. You know why I hate that comment so bad? I've told you, but do you remember why I hate it so bad? And if anyone uses that, I saw a TikTok once that said, if you find someone that uses, it is what it is, you better stay away from that person because they don't care. No, baloney. That's a weak person. Why?
It's just settling for whatever it is, what it is. Like nothing, there's not a situation in life that it just is. It always could be better. It always could be worse. And it always is changing dependent upon your behavior, their behavior, maybe outside forces that are controlling and changing it, but it never just is. It may be for a second, but it changes. And so it's up to only you can't control anyone else's behavior, to be able to assess it and say, what am I going to do about it? What am I willing to accept? What am I willing to take? Or what do I need to do to change this and make it better or worse? Right?
Absolutely, 100%. So when we see this, it is what it is mentality, that means the person who's stating that stupidity really doesn't want to change. They don't know how, maybe they don't know why they don't want to, but they're kind of saying, this isn't my fault, this is your fault. And so how do we start to dissect this to show these individuals, the person that's creating the behavior, like, you need to change this, and the person receiving the behavior, I want you to stand up for the authentic you, and then still maintain a progress of healing the relationship, because that means each party has to become accountable.
And that's the difficult thing. When there's always two or more parties, to get both of them on the same level, that they're both willing to accept, address the issue, take accountability, and try to do something better is very difficult to find. When it comes, that's great. There's a lot of movement that can happen there.
Yeah.
But if it is only one-sided, what are you going to do if the other person isn't willing to change?
Yeah. See, and I think this is why, with those that are very close to Marissa and I and kind of know our story, the one thing that I had to truly allow myself to feel the measure of, which was my own accountability, I had to start understanding that, look, I'm the creator of this chaos, and I'm doing it to protect this heart of mine that has been so fractured from growing up in a very dysfunctional family, that this person who's sitting across from me does deserve to see the authentic self. And when all this was becoming, through the process of therapy before we were married, as it was being exposed, what I realized is, as it was landing on your heart, you didn't judge me for it, but you held me accountable to it. What's the difference between that? Not judging, but holding me accountable.
Part of it's understanding your story. It's easy to get caught up and distracted by the negative behaviors, the substance abuse, the porn addiction, the, distracting, whatever it is, the negative behaviors. And that's easy to see that and want to address that, but that's not the real issue. So when somebody goes in and they just want help because they want their son or brother or spouse to just stop using a substance or stop using porn, that won't fix the issue. So it's understanding what's behind it and being able to understand more of your story and why were you lying? Why had you struggled with addiction for, years and years before? Help me understand where you were coming from. And it wasn't just that you're being an idiot, knock it off, you're so dumb.
Yeah.
It was, you were hurt. And how can I help support you in trying to address that hurt so that you don't have to feel like you need to lie to me?
Yeah. And that was the course. And gentlemen, I need you to listen to this too, is because I knew very, very quickly that the only person that could change my outcome was me. And it was awesome because the process of me being able to understand myself and become mindful of who I am and what I've been through, that my betrayal trauma from my mother wasn't normal. It was an eye-opener, but I had to become very aware of who I was and my tendencies to try and hide to avoid disappointment. I truly believe that a lot of us men do that because we are hiding from the fear of hurting you. And then what happens when we hide it? It hurts you.
Well, and then it's also the shame of even being honest about what you've done and who that's painful. That's hard to see. It's hard to look at. And so if you just avoid it and lie about it and hide it, then it's not really there, right? Well, guess what it is? And it's still rotting in the background and causing internal damage, which ends up coming out. There's no pain inside that won't at some point become external through behavior, through physical means,
I like that.
Whatever.
I like that a lot. I've never really quite thought of it that way, but you're right. You as much as you want to suppress it, it will come out, and it'll come out in when you can't hide it anymore. That's when you're disassociating yourself from your family system because you're constantly drinking or you're smoking, or you're not connecting with your wife, and so you're down watching the pornography and avoiding, the real issues.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've really had to focus on too was that I need to take responsibility for me. I can't take responsibility for you. Me not allowing you to fill the measure of whatever you want to experience,
Mhm.
it takes away from your ability to heal, right? It keeps you in this constant mindset of like questioning, am I okay? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
It's a classic kind of like position to keep you so unbalanced that I've always got the upper hand. That is so not fair in a relationship to do that.
So how did you get to the point that you were willing to risk that? Because that's scary.
Mhm.
And coming out with that and saying, I'm willing to accept my own and take accountability for this. And that means it's ugly and it's hard. And it's like, how do you get to that?
I remember it was when kind of everything came out where Don, who was a friend of mine, and Marissa's that we worked with, for some reason took me under his wing and held me to a level that I just didn't think was humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
And when he disclosed all those secrets to you,
Mm-hmm.
I had nowhere else to run. But the relationship you and I had built leading up to this, when you kind of said, here's the line in the sand, this is it.
Yeah.
It was different from most relationships because for some reason I wanted to keep investing in it. Most other relationship I'd been in, I'm like, fine, I can move on.
Yeah.
But at that time in my life, I was like, why does she even care? Like, she's not mad, but she's concerned. Does that make sense? It was a feeling of like your genuine concern for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. And so you kind of gave me a little outlet. You need to get some help.
Yeah.
You need to finish what you've started, and I'll support you, but nothing moves forward until. And I thought,
Our relationship, the seriousness, because we'd been talking about getting married,
Yeah.
the getting engaged is on hold while you get.
And I think I do a lot of, early on in our relationship, I did a lot of stuff to try and prove you wrong. And so I thought, all right, I'll do this and I'll show you they can't help me. And that's when I had the classic, going to the therapist for the first time and me explaining everything to him. And he's like, I know what's wrong with you. And I'm like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, you don't know who you are. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing ever. And I remember when I told you that, I think that was the pinnacle too, Marissa, is when I told you that, when I went back to your house and you asked me how my first session of therapy went. And I'm like, well, one and done. I'm done. I totally intended on never going back to my therapist, Arlen, right? Yeah. Go figure. What a great name for a therapist. I wish I could find him. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was trying to weasel out of it and saying, well, it's a rhetorical question. No one can answer it. And when you got honest with me and it was genuine, mm-hmm. there wasn't any, you need to go back. You have to go back or else it's game over. It was more like, well, let me show you what I know to answer that question. Yeah. And that blew me away. That scared me because I'm like, wait a second, I'm 20 whatever years old here and I have no clue who I am. And you've got a very strong understanding and you're still learning. But like you told me that, I'm like, maybe there's something here.
Well, there's a key right there that you just jumped over.
Yeah.
You were willing to listen.
Yeah.
You were willing to listen to what I had to say.
Very good point.
No, sorry, it is rhetorical, whatever. Yeah, I'm glad you believe in yourself that way. That's wonderful. But you're willing to just be open to a different perspective and go, maybe the way I've always seen things is wrong.
Yeah.
Which always goes back to, I love the analogy of Plato's cave. I don't know. Do you want to show that? Do you want me to?
You'll do a better job than I do.
If I do. I love the video.
Basically, we'll do the Cliff Notes version. Basically, what it means is like what you're seeing isn't truly your reality until you immerse yourself in it. And it doesn't matter who points it out. It doesn't matter what people try to do to convince you until you, honest to goodness, experience it for yourself and see it, feel it, breathe it with your own self. You will never believe it exists. Yeah.
The philosopher Plato talks about this group of men who are chained in the back of a cave. And it's a black, dark place to live, but they have a fire. All they can see is the back of the cave. So they're chained, not looking outside the cave. And there's a fire behind them casting light on the cave wall. And outside of the cave, on the open door of the cave, I guess.
The opening,
The
yeah.
world is happening. They see trees, they see wind blowing the leaves, they see people walking by, people living their life, but all they can see is their perspective of the shadows of those things happening on the cave wall. And finally, one of them gets free. He goes outside.
He turns around, walks out there, like, holy cow.
The whole real world in 3D, in color, in, there's just so much to it. And he comes right back in and he's telling the guys that are chained up, he's like, there's a world out there. There's something better. You've got to come see it. And they're like, no,
whatever, man.
This is all there is. This is the world. That's a tree. That's a person. And he's like, no, you don't understand. You don't see it. And until they can get themselves to even be open to the possibility that maybe what they're perceiving is wrong, they won't be able to ever go see it. And if they refuse to ever get unchained and go look at something else, then yeah, it makes it very difficult to have any progression.
Absolutely. And so, listeners, when you're thinking about this in a relationship, then that's why gaslighting is so troublesome in relationships, is because they'll literally convince you of something that doesn't exist.
Slowly start chaining you to only seeing what's on the cave wall.
And I thought about this, and I even asked this question last night on this panel. I said, I need to understand, because I'd never had a situation like what we experienced last night, to ask a question that I've always kind of wondered. Like I hear there were several individuals in this that had been through some betrayal trauma. And, I said, I'm curious because I never saw the other side of this coin with my mother or my siblings, by which they stood up on their own 2 feet and said, I'm worth more than this. My mother got married and divorced millions of times, but 8 or 9 times. And I'm like, why do you keep putting yourself in situations by which you know the outcome? You are playing the same card game in every situation. And I was kind of blown away by, like, what was it that got you, I guess, free to turn around and say, wait a minute, this isn't what it is. This is something bigger. And it was interesting, their responses, because I'm like, this is amazing. When, although they'd been hurt and whatnot, and, at some point have been identified as a victim of betrayal trauma, they don't stay there, right? We talk about this all the time, the victims versus agents. They don't stay a victim. My mother did. And I will never understand why. But here's the deal, right? Is I think over all those times and with experiences that she came to believe that that's all there was. That was the lifestyle she led. And I think that is miserable.
That became her normal. And that's all she saw was the back of that cave.
Absolutely. And so, if you ever get to that situation where it is what it is, you better raise an eyebrow to that, because that means that there's someone trying to convince you that it's just going to stay right here, that you're solidly grounded, and that can't happen.
Well, and just the concept of, the victim mentality is very difficult to get out of if you stay there too long. The longer you stay there, the more difficult it is to become free from that. And so much of our life and our future, everything depends on our perspective and our, I guess, mental fortitude. If you believe that everything happens to you, and you're just a victim of everything rather than what you can do to react to situations and stay on top of things, then it's difficult to ever change anything, but you have to be on top of your mental.
Well, so how do we approach it though? Because, there will be many people that we will meet and be a part of, because I get family therapy requests, couple counseling all the time. By the time you are in a situation by which you're like, we should probably go get counseling, you're already past maybe to that point of no return. I would say every married couple should at least at one stage in their life get some counseling. And, you and I were very lucky, and circumstances were that after I told, the therapist Arland, after I'd seen him for quite a while by myself, that I'm asking you to marry me. He's like, ooh, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, man, this is happening. He's like, well, you better start bringing her with you. I was blown away, because when you came into therapy with me, I started realizing that, wait a minute, you're not perfect. I had created this vision in my head of you and whatnot, as if you could no way, shape, or form understand the complexities of the child experience I had. And I was shocked to find out that although different characteristics, different forms of severity, you felt the same things I felt, but had a very different path of
emotions are the same
of dealing with it. And so we were very lucky to have a little over a year, I think, of therapy counseling before we were married, So that first, they always say, what, the first 2 years or first, what were they saying?
The
Like,
first year of marriage is the most difficult because that's when you're getting to know each other on a deeper level. But ours was great.
ours is great. Always
It was
has
our
been.
engagement that was horrendous.
That's kind of crazy. Yeah. Which is like, you signed up for this now, but it helped immensely because it formed an understanding in my mind's eye that you never would or never had to need me, which sounds kind of funny. Like, you don't need me, you choose in. And so you want to be with me. And that is a huge relief, but also kind of like what does that truly mean? You know, I watched situations my mother got in, my sisters got in, that put them in situations by which they needed to be needed.
Yeah. And that's difficult. That usually comes from a place of low self-esteem. And it's really hard to get out of that. But one of the only ways you can do that is by working on yourself. Because yeah, it feels good to be needed. It feels good to be wanted and, have somebody rely on you. But think about the concept of how good it could feel and how good it can be to have somebody want to be with you rather than need to be with you. And they choose in, even knowing everything about you without having to hide and have secrets. And again, a lot of times people want to just hold on to that stuff and think, I can't share this because they'll leave. But guess what? You have to give it all. So they have the choice to choose in or not. And
absolutely.
Promise, if there's somebody you're around that isn't, you're wanting that relationship and you want them to choose in and you have to hide to get them to stay, it's not going to last long term.
No, it can't.
So,
it can't. And that's why situations that we find where people the people that lie and manipulate early stages of relationships can be so problematic is simply because you're not being true to yourself. You're not being true to the person you've chosen. And you're coming to the table with severe issues that you're hoping you won't be exposed, because you're thinking, if I can get married, I won't need to look at pornography. If I get married, the happiness I'll have, I won't need, to deal with the skeletons in the closet. That type of mindset and that type of thinking will only lead to extreme emotional turbulence down the road, right?
Yeah.
So we ask you guys this question then, like you were willing to invest in me. Why? Because I was a flippin' hot mess. What did you see that kind of showed you that, okay, I know all the good about Blu and I know all the bad about Blu and I'm in? What were you thinking?
I saw situations because we had worked together and we were working with at-risk youth at the time. And I saw ways that you interacted with the kids that I know you didn't know I was watching. You didn't see me paying attention. And I saw how you interacted with them. And I saw what I now know too as your true self. And I saw your heart and I saw what kind of a person you were. It wasn't because of the lies and the things you had told me. And I saw like the good person I fell in love with. It wasn't any of the other stuff. And so I knew that there was more to you.
Well, and I think, listeners, I want you to understand that the reason why there was such deceit there too was because of the fear of the knowing. And it was more like creating these false personas so that they'd never ask the more difficult questions, like, why do none of your families have the same last name? Why do you guys all look different? Yeah. What kind of poverty did you experience? I was trying to create something that I wasn't, and it was to hide. It was 100% to hide, and to avoid losing people, off of the reality. And what I mean by that too is relationships growing up were very, I guess, based off of perception. If we look the part, if we act the part, then we'll be portrayed as the part. But really, when the door was closed, it was a life of hell. It was abuse and neglect and poverty and scarcity. Yeah. And if any of us were to raise a flag to that, then the potential of losing, even that little, I guess, thread of, family love, whatever it was being based off of, would have been gone. Yeah. And so I learned how to hide in plain sight quite well. And, it's kind of funny. People will talk to me and even they'll say, man, Blu is an intense therapist and he can get you. There was no way I would have ever dared to question or to push or to even inquire, because I was very shy and very withdrawn. Mm-hmm. Me being able to come to terms with who I was and why I was doing this, and then have to correct those behaviors. It wasn't easy. It didn't happen overnight. It took lots of time. And I'd say 22 years of marriage, we still, have these times where I'm like, all right, we gotta adjust this. I have to talk about that. Which is kind of a cool thing too, because it shows that like there's always work in progress, right?
Yeah.
There's never been this like point of nirvana. It's always like there's always something we can work on.
Yeah.
There've been situations even recently that I'm like, you've been involved in where I'm like, really? But then I'm like, all right, I can't be mad. I can't be upset. All I have to do is just listen. And there's things that I've done when you're like, dude, why? And I'm like, well, this is what I was thinking. But it's that open and honest communication. And I think you hit it nail on the head, listening more than speaking.
Yeah.
So that being said, what do we do with all this knowledge now, Marissa?
Be open, talk about it, seek professional help, counseling, and there's a lot that can come about if you're willing to learn.
100%. We'd love to help you along the way. If you're hearing this and you have some of those blips on your radar, reach out. You can get a hold of us for individual therapy, couples counseling, family therapy. We can even get you out here, do some recreational therapy with athletic director Marissa, who is a recreational therapist. But we'd love to have you guys come and be part of this. Addict to Athlete is not just an addiction recovery program. It is a mental health and kind of behavioral health experience as well. Because the things that we do, even helping people overcome addictions, can be used to help overcome vices and problematic issues in relationships, or even things that you have that you want to change about yourself. So, come be a part of it. Check out our other podcasts. Marissa on our website has really done a great job pulling a bunch of information and categorizing our podcasts into things that could benefit you. And so if you go on addicttoathlete.org, go under the resources, you'll find the podcast.
Yep.
And you can go see educational topics that have zero to do with addiction. You can do, like inspirational people, professionals we've talked to, even down to addiction. So go check that out, addicttoathlete.org. All of our content's on there. Information to reach out to us, to see what the teams are doing, our online store. It's a one-stop site to get everything you need for what is Team Addict to Athlete. So as we wrap it up here, Marissa, we've got some cool things on the horizon. Stay close to all of our socials. You're going to see a very big push that we're coming out with some principle-based stuff that I'm really excited to get launching. And stay tuned to the podcast. This episode of our live show will be reposted as a podcast tomorrow. So if you had to jump in and jump out, we'd love to have you go back and listen. Share it with people that might be having an issue with this. And athletes, continue to do all you can do to help turn your mess into a very powerful message.